What did we learn from the Aggies' 23-21 win over the Arkansas Razorbacks? All that and more on this episode of the Locked On Aggies podcast.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Locked On Aggies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Joey Ikes. Thanks so much for making Locked On Aggies your first listen. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, and we're also on YouTube, so please check us out there. I'm joined once again today by my good buddy, Cameron Honesty. Cam, we're going to talk about this Arkansas game.
Yep.
And to do that, what a psycho game, first of all. And to do that, we are going to look through the article that you wrote for Aggies Wire, where we both do our writing and our pontificating through the written word there. 5 things we learned from the 23-21 win over the Arkansas Razorbacks. And the number one thing, and I think it was something that I covered in my recap podcast right after the game, was that Max Johnson really seems to be the guy for the job here, both because of the poise and the ability to handle the pressure in the big situation, but also the ability to really go out and make a dynamic play here and there whenever you need it, which when you have a big talent roster like this, that's really what you need from your quarterback.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing. It's one of the things that I think everybody's paying attention to. And when we went into this game, obviously this was going to be the toughest matchup they've had yet. And after Miami last week, that was the first career start for Max Johnson with Texas A&M. We didn't know what we were going to get from him right away. You had some flashes of, like you said, poise in the pocket, getting the ball out quickly, like quick release, obviously. And, just a sense of he was taking control of the offense. And I think that was the term that a lot of fans were using. They felt comfortable knowing when he was going to get in there, you didn't have to worry about, throwing an interception right away or not, taking control of the situation, especially with, pass rush getting in your face, get in and out to your outlet guy, just those situational things that you need to know as a quarterback, and especially in the SEC against really good defenses every week that you're going to face, that you need to know your situational football very, very well. But coming into that game, there were still question marks with the offense, obviously, and we have said before, it's not gonna change overnight. They're not gonna go into next week, against Mississippi State, and all of a sudden, Max Johnson is going to throw for 350 to 400 yards. That's just not how it works. If it does happen, well, I mean, that's football. Randomly, things like that happen. But we were expecting that minor improvements each week from Max were going to be the thing we'd be looking at. And it's not going to be, like I said, it's not going to be huge. But those incremental changes and everything with him as a leader to working with the wide receiver group he has, and getting in this game, he finally got his weapons back. I don't mean to go off cuff, so we'll stick to the game. So getting Evan Stewart back was huge, and he did make his presence felt pretty early. I think he finished with about three receptions or more for about 39 yards, and that doesn't seem like a lot on paper, but when they needed to move the chains, he was there. And him combined with tight end Donovan Green, who had, really showed us how good he is. Another freshman, showed up. And really the bulk of the receiving was Evan Stewart, Donovan Green. I think Ainias had a catch there, a pretty big one for a conversion. And then a couple other guys stepped in there. But Evan was huge, and he found him early and often. And one of the only offensive touchdowns in the game was to Evan Stewart on that beautiful kind of lob pass. I mean, he was dropping back off his back foot and just kind of dropped it right in. And Stewart made a great catch, and that cut the lead to 14-7. And then obviously, we'll probably talk about this later, the incredible 82-yard fumble return by Damani Richardson that that made it a 14-13 after the missed extra point, and then the game was changed immediately going into halftime. But either way, going back to Max, the passing yards, the completion rate is about 52% overall. It wasn't that great, but that doesn't matter to me right now. He's going to keep getting better, and he's not going to face the same defense. And we were saying it all week that Arkansas had a bad pass defense, and he did take advantage of it a couple times. Now, there were times when he threw perfect passes, and they were dropped. He threw a perfect a deep pass to Moose Muhammad, and if Moose would have just kind of kept running under it, that would have been a huge gain. And I mean, so that's not on Max Johnson. That's just drops happen. So overall, he had a great game. And again, he took control of the offense. I never felt watching that, they couldn't have success. It's just things happened, and especially going against an Arkansas defense with a great pass rush, a very good linebacker core that got to him a couple times. And again, the Aggies O-line has been, up and down, so you weren't expecting them to have their breakout game yet. But overall, he did a fantastic job, and I'm excited to see him next weekend.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Your next thing that we learned, and I'll put this in my wording that I like to use when Devon Achane makes a play. Devon Achane, he's good at the football.
That's as basic as it should be.
Yes, absolutely. So Devon Achane in the game had 159 yards rushing, 15 yards receiving, 174 total yards from scrimmage. No kick return or punt return yardage in this game because somebody on the Arkansas sideline decided to be intelligent on Saturday night. But the 63-yard run that is really the play that sort of unlocked the gate for A&M offensively was just a huge play. And he is, Devon Achane is everything for this A&M offense at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree, and that's the thing. He's a guy that I just do not worry about at all. And a lot of people, coming out of the season opener against Sam Houston State, there were a lot of problems offensively. So the fact that he wasn't getting the same amount of yardage per rush, and really just was having an off first half, he did pick it up in the second half. He had a great second half. That led to his score, and that that second half of the opener was when I didn't worry about him anymore. I knew that he was going to come out and get his every game because no matter how the O-line is blocking, he's still going to find a hole. He has one of the most his burst is incredible. This is a guy that, man, NFL scouts are drooling over him right now. They'll probably be watching every A&M game, and I guarantee they're going to be rushing to the TV or trying to get to the Mississippi State game this weekend because I have a feeling that Devon will have a really good game this weekend, just based on the defensive matchup. But overall, he is your game changer. He's the guy you are going to go to in the run game, in the passing game, and he is such a great weapon for someone like Max Johnson, who again is making his third career start. He's just getting comfortable in the offense. He can always rely on Devon Achane, and especially he can always rely on Devon Achane with the recent injury to Ainias Smith. So,
absolutely, like I said, he's everything to this offense, and it's phenomenal to have a player like that in the backfield who can impact the game as a runner, as a receiver, and as a return man. And it's an unbelievable place for the A&M offense to be as they sort of try to find their footing in the wide receiver room and at quarterback to just have that stabilizing force for sure.
100%. Yeah.
Yep. Guys, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit before we get to our next couple of points that we learned about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for football betting information this season. Find all of the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to BetOnline or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And we're gonna tie two of these things together that we learned. And one of those is that, as we talked about on our last podcast, Ainias Smith is going to be out for the season, but he's going to continue to be a very large presence for this team off the field, and his impact will continue to show on the field. And then we're going to tie that to the idea that Evan Stewart, number one in your program, is now also wide receiver number one for A&M, even as a true freshman following that Ainias Smith injury.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Evan Stewart is going to grow up very, very fast. He always has had to do that. And he showed, and that's the thing. I have complete confidence in him, not just because he's the 5-star receiver, one of the top guys coming out. It's because, after the mistake those guys made and the suspensions that occurred pre-Miami game, I knew that they were going to grow up very, very, very fast after that, because I know what happens within the locker room when these guys get suspended. We've seen it over the years with Jimbo Fisher and what happens after. These guys shape up immediately and they go back to contributing at a high level because they know what's at stake. They know their football future's at stake. They know what they have to do here in order to go to the next level. And they want to succeed here as much as possible. And so really, he knows that. He knew that immediately when Ainias Smith went down. And this is the thing about Ainias Smith's injury that I'll quickly get on, is that losing him as a player is huge. You're losing a very explosive, dynamic offensive weapon, as somebody who in the punt return game is huge, and obviously in the slot is probably one of the more feared slot wide receivers in the country. And so you lose that production. But the thing that I want to get to people to understand is that you're not losing that leadership. You're not losing that mentorship that he's going to bring to that young receiver group. Because overall, even without Ainias Smith, this is still a very deep wide receiver group, because the guys that are going to come in to fill that slot role are both very young, very talented. Keith Brown and Moose Muhammad had played, significant snaps to a point. Moose Muhammad played a little bit last year. He has experience in this offense, and obviously Keith Brown has as well, just not as many. But these are both very fast, dynamic receivers who are going to be mentored by Ainias Smith. But getting back to Evan Stewart, is that he is playing that X position. And I think a lot of football fans know what that X position does. But also he's going to be moved around a lot because of his athleticism, because of the way he can stretch the field, and because of his ability to separate. And so we're going to see Evan Stewart probably primarily play that X, but we're going to see him move around a lot. And we're going to see guys like Chris Marshall as well play more snaps. And that's a legitimate deep threat. And that's also a guy who can play the Z, and he's also a great separator. So not only is Evan Stewart going to become more important, Chris Marshall is going to become more important, Moose Muhammad, Keith Brown, and Chase Lane, all those guys are just going to become more and more important, because you're going to have to fill a void. Because Ainias Smith, no matter what your opinion on his injury was in terms of how he affects the team, he affects the team. But we're not just going to be those guys who say, well, he affects the play in this way and this way. He's one of the greatest Aggies of all time, in my opinion. He's going to be a guy I will never forget. And I almost teared up thinking about that this was the last time, possibly, that he was going to play for Texas A&M and don the maroon and white. So we got to look at that from the personal standpoint as well. But overall, I'm not very worried. And I know some people might be, because you're losing that senior player. And now you've got a lot of young guys coming out there. And how are the defenses going to key on him? But overall, Jimbo knows what to do, and you got to trust him.
Absolutely. All right, as we move on to our fifth and final point, I'm even going to take your point and I'm going to expand it a little bit.
Sure.
And you said Antonio Johnson, and I'm going to expand it to, and the A&M defense is living up to basically every preseason expectation that we held, and they still continue to do it a little bit shorthanded on defense.
Sure.
But Antonio Johnson and the defense, absolutely phenomenal to this point in the season.
Yeah, and the biggest surprise to me, and I remember in the preseason doing the profiles, was Chris Russell. This kid has been incredible, and he made his presence felt against Arkansas. And we talked about the 82-yard fumble return. Well, guess who stripped the ball? It was Chris Russell. And you're going against a quarterback in KJ Jefferson, who's a big man. This is a guy who, when he's coming downhill and you're not ready to take him on, or you're not kind of equal to his size, he can run you over. But these guys were not scared of him. And he made him pay a couple times in the first half. And A&M's and DJ Durkin adjusted that defense very well. And those guys started coming after him, and Antonio Johnson finished. And this is the thing. I think I mentioned Antonio because of all the preseason accolades and because he's one of the more favorite kind of Aggies that on the team. And he's a guy that we all know is going to be very successful at the next level, and that he was going to come in this season no matter what people were saying and hyping him up. He wasn't going to fail, and he was going, and barring injury, is going to have a fantastic season and is already having a fantastic season. But overall, the defense has been, it's been beautiful to watch because you're seeing a lot of young guys come in, and even in three-man fronts, which they've been playing a lot of three-man fronts. I've heard a lot of questions about that. Look, they're going to be playing a three-man front this weekend because they're playing an air raid team, so prepare for more of that. But even with a three-man front, they're getting pressure. And Shamar Stewart is a guy that I've talked about on this podcast a couple times. He was getting held a lot in that game, and there's a reason why he was getting held a lot, because he is just a bull rusher, man. He will just come after you with pure strength, pure grit, and you have to hold him. And that's a kid. That's an 18-year-old kid. And so the future is so bright. I mean, it'll blind you at this point. But everybody's contributing and getting guys like McKinley Jackson back, who didn't actually dress for the game, which is a little surprising. But that's good that getting him back to 100%. That's one of your leaders defensively at the nose tackle position. Getting Walter Nolan back was big, and everybody's starting to get pretty healthy. And that's the thing. Gabriel Brown-Dindy's another guy who's going to contribute in that pass rush. But overall, Antonio Johnson is the leader of this team. He's the leader of this defense, and he's doing his job. Damani Richardson has been fantastic. Tyreek Chappelle has been great. Jalen Jones, when he returned last week, has been great. And I could do this all day, but we don't have time. So overall, I'm not worried about this defense, and I know even like next week or this weekend, adjustments will be made, and they've been doing a fantastic job with that. I think that's one of the things that DJ Durkin has been a little better at than maybe Mike Elko. Mike Elko was fantastic, but it's a little different of how he uses the players, how he adjusts to these much different offenses coming up every week. And he finally has, I guess, more athletes to do that this year. So,
yep. And the thing about the 3 down, 4 down deal is, even as you look across the NFL, in terms of base defense, when it's not pure pass rush situation, so many of these teams are playing 3 down, and it's not a traditional 3-4 in that there's not true 5 techniques playing on the outside shoulder of the tackle and all this other kind of stuff. But especially when you're a team like A&M that is significantly, I would argue, better on the interior of the defensive line than you are 100%. On the edge. A lot of times you're better off playing 3 down and having 2 or even all 3 of those guys be interior defensive linemen, and have, some of your linebackers and defensive backs serve as those second level defenders or that 4th rusher, and create the mystery of where the 4th and 5th rusher is going to come from, as opposed to lining up. If you've got the guys, if you've got the horses, lining up 4 down, spread them out, put them wide, rush from 9 techniques and 4-eye techniques, and just take off at the outside shoulder of those guys is a fantastic way to play defense. And it's incredibly fun to watch whenever it's working well. But the one spot A&M doesn't really just have dudes at right now that are just bona fide, experienced, skilled, plus explosive, all that kind of stuff, is on the edge. They got players there who are playing with phenomenal effort, and they're learning and developing, but they're super young. And because of that, they don't have the horses to play on the edge. So they're going to play a little bit more condensed on the front and let the defensive line, or let the linebackers, who are playing pretty well, Edgerrin Cooper and Chris Russell, like you mentioned, as well as guys like Damani Richardson and Antonio Johnson, to play in and around and off of those 3-man fronts in order to control the running game and be able to generate pass rush as well.
100%. Yeah, that's a great explanation. I mean, that's the thing. You got to really look into the football. You got to look into why they're doing these things. And a guy that I always think of that really exemplifies why they're doing that is someone like Anthony Lucas, who's young, but that is a man who can play inside and out, and that is a strong defensive end. That is somebody that he perfectly fits that 3-man front. So, and thank you for mentioning Edgerrin Cooper. I totally forgot about. He's been fantastic as well. They've all been so good.
So, that's one of those positions that a lot of folks said, A&M should have done more at that position coming into the season. It's hard to argue that, just because, you lost Andre White already this season. You didn't have a ton of just bona fide depth there. but sometimes you get these, a lack of depth, a lack of established depth creates these opportunities for these unsung guys like Chris Russell to step up into, being the second leading tackler on the team and making the biggest play of the game. And you keep calling it an 82-yard fumble recovery. I'm calling it 98 because when we have pitchers throw a combined no-hitter in baseball, we don't call it 6 innings of no-hit ball. We call it a no-hitter. Yeah. And so I'm calling it a 99-yard fumble return. Even if the statistics book calls it 82, I'm calling it 99.
He did. He smacked the ball away and the ball kind of rolled and then tired. So yeah, technically I would say I agree.
But he fumbled at the 1-yard line. It's a 99-yard return if you score. That's in my book. That's who cares what the official statistics say?
Yeah. Don't take those yards away from those guys. They earned them.
Absolutely. And these days, every potential new hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. I've told you guys before that most of the jobs that I've found throughout my career have been found on LinkedIn. And this goes all the way back to 2012. And I can just tell you guys the advances that the folks over at LinkedIn have made from the candidate side to make it easier to find and more attractive to find really good jobs on LinkedIn is the same reason why, from the hiring standpoint, you really want to leverage what LinkedIn Jobs has to offer. So it's extremely easy to go into LinkedIn Jobs and create your free job post. Then take that job, add it to your profile, and add the purple hiring frame to your picture and spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions, which I mentioned before, are key to help candidates find the right role. Also make it easy for you to find the right candidates with the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's extremely important for your small business to finish the year strong, and the right team member might be just the thing you need to help you do that. It's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions may apply. All right, Cameron, we're going to turn our attention now to the Mississippi State Bulldogs.
Yep, the Fighting Mike Leaches.
Yes, absolutely. As an individual with an affinity for Mike Leach that dates back to his time at Texas Tech and even predates that, back to there. If you find my old laptops from 2007 or 2008, somewhere in there, there's a copy of the Oklahoma offensive playbook from about 2000, whenever he was the offensive coordinator of those national championship level teams. So I have a special affinity in my heart for Mike Leach, and somewhere on my bookshelf, somewhere there's a copy of Swing Your Sword, which is his sort of his memoirs or autobiography, or however you want to word it.
Still need to read it.
Yes, it's pretty phenomenal, to be honest. He's quite the character, and we're going to go to our friends at Bet Online that we talked about earlier in the show to help us preview this game, as we've done the last couple of weeks. And the line on this game, the spread is A&M plus 3.5. And, just like we've talked about the last few weeks, we're going to go ahead and go to the point total too. The point total here is only 44.5.
Wow.
So we're talking about a Mississippi State team and everything that they do offensively. Mike Leach, the coach, Will Rogers, the phenomenal quarterback. And Bet Online says, hey, A&M is going to win this game, call it 23.5 to 20 or 20, something like that.
There,
24 to 21 or something. Yeah. Basically somewhere in that 20, somewhere in that neighborhood. There are guys who do a lot more sports gambling and leverage point totals for DFS and all that kind of stuff, that they could tell you a 3.5 point spread on a 44.5 point total and tell you the implied score very quickly. That's not me. But over under 44.5 with A&M plus 3.5. What are your initial thoughts on the lines, Cameron?
Yeah, that's interesting because I mean, and I briefly mentioned that how A&M's defense, like anybody who plays them, is going to have to adjust to that air raid, and they're a new type of air raid. They're kind of he will run the ball if he has to, and I watched. Watched one of the first games. I think it was week 2 against Arizona. They ran the ball pretty efficiently because they had to run the ball. Arizona had adjusted well to the pass, and they had the athletes to do it. So this is not a team where you go in thinking they're going to throw the ball 60 times. Will Rogers did that last weekend, so I mean it's possible, and that's how the offense dictates. But yeah, I don't know. That's a weird line for this game specifically because I know that Mississippi State has a good defense. I don't know if their defense overall is that much better than the teams aside from than Miami's or than Arkansas's. Now Arkansas's pass defense is bad, but their run defense was pretty good. So I think they're pretty decent. I think they're going to be a good challenge for A&M's offense. But yeah, that's a lot of faith in A&M's defense adjusting well, obviously. So I mean, that's interesting. I thought they would have gone a little higher because they thought A&M would come in and allow some explosive plays just because they're passing the ball so much. But hey, that's confidence in A&M's D.
Yeah, I think that's what it really boils down to is BetOnline specifically and Vegas as a whole seems to have a really high level of confidence in the A&M defense.
Yeah.
Especially considering, Mississippi State is averaging a little over 37 points per game on their own for the season. And so that's a pretty phenomenal number. I mean, and in two of their 4 games so far, they've scored over 40 points. Now, one of them was Bowling Green and the other one was Memphis, but hey, you got to play the people in front of you. And
Exactly.
and they scored 39 against Arizona. They did only score 16 against LSU, but they had a lead in that game before LSU really clamped it down. So I think that's really the overarching point on the point total piece is there is a growing sense of stability and confidence, not just from fans and media like us, but from the folks who really stand to benefit the most from understanding this stuff.
Yeah.
A&M is going to keep their opponents below their regular scoring pace.
Yeah.
Pretty much anybody that they play against. So we'll see if that continues to hold true, next week as we play Alabama and as we get into some of these other schools. But as we get into the season, Arkansas and Mississippi State were 2 of those who we thought, they're going to get into these more difficult offenses to defend, and are they going to be able to do that? And here we are through the Arkansas game, and they were able to do that. And so if we continue to see them play at that level, basically what that's doing is that's just buying time for this offense to just continue to develop until hopefully you can win some games 23-21 or 17-9 or these sort of uninspiring scores. Maybe you go beat Mississippi State 24-20.5, I think would be the right way to word that implied line as I sit here and look at it again. But I think that's really the overarching point is that there's just so much. The way this defense is playing is just it just stabilizes everything.
Yeah. And I mean, and basically it goes back to my original point is that they don't believe that A&M's offense is just going to explode. They just don't think that's going to happen. They know, what you have in the defense, the athletes they have, that they're going to get better and better each week. So you trust that, and especially in the broadcast, had to be annoying if G.J. Durkin heard that about, well, Arkansas had scored 50 points when he was at Auburn, or when he was at Mississippi, and they scored 50 points on his defense. And I mean, he can't adjust. And, finally, I think this is a little comeuppance for him in that, and for everybody who he's played against recently of, look, I'm at A&M now. I know what I'm doing, and this is going to be the strength of this team going forward. So,
yep, absolutely. One other line that we'll look at before we get out of here is, will any team score 40 points? And I think what this is really saying is, will A&M allow Mississippi State to score 40 points? Because I don't think, considering they scored 31 against Sam Houston State, and that stands now 4 weeks into the season as their highest point total of the year. Yes is plus 538, which means it's, basically 5-1. And no is minus 11, basically minus 1100. So,
yeah.
So basically what they're saying is, we know you're going to say no team is going to score 40 points. So if you want to win any money by betting no on this 40-point over-under for a single team, you have to throw an absurd amount of money at this to win anything. And I think that really sort of points out the point that we're making overall on this thing, is that, I'll say it this way: the only line anywhere close to that minus 1100 that BetOnline has right now is, will there be overtime? Is that minus 2000? And there's nothing else that's, even over 500, even minus 500 or more. So it really just shows you Vegas really, A, doesn't believe in this A&M offense all that much, but B, they believe very, very strongly in this A&M defense to be able to, in spite of the fact that they're not getting a ton of help and playing with big leads, to be able to hold their opponents down.
Yeah, and the last short point is that they beat A&M last year. So there's some revenge for Jimbo Fisher. And that was one of the more embarrassing losses for them, with the same quarterback and a lot of the same offense coming back. So this is a game that Jimbo's not going to come into and get blown out. I just don't see that happening. And so we could say the same next weekend with Alabama. And I'm not going there yet, but we could say the same thing there of, Nick Saban, it's revenge. So this isn't going to happen here with this point total. But I understand why they're looking that way. And those matter. Those rivalries, those, you beat me last year, you beat me those matter when you start betting on these teams. So,
yep, absolutely. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in tonight, today. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen. I am your host, Joey Ikes. You can find me on Twitter at Joey Ikes. You can find Cameron on Twitter at Cameron Honesty, and the last name is OHNYSTY. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Aggies, and please check us out on YouTube, Locked On Aggies as well. Like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified every time we post a new video, and so that we can help grow this channel and give you guys the best A&M coverage that we can. Now that you've made Locked On Aggies your first listen, go check out Locked On SEC with Chris Gordy and the experts of Locked On. We'll take you around the SEC in 30 minutes or less every single day. Thanks so much, guys. We will catch you tomorrow.